Hello everyone, welcome to Writing Quest. Today we have Nicole Wilbur. We've had her on the channel before, and so we're just catching up and seeing how things are going with her. What's new?
What's new? Well, I guess I've started to work on a different book than the one that I was working on last time, and started querying the other one as well.
Nice.
So yeah, lots of new things.
Yeah,
going on. It's very.
So did you finish the one that you did before, and that's the one you're querying right now?
Yeah, that one I finished. I think I was on draft 8 or 9.
Nice.
Of it, and I decided to try doing some querying, seeing what happened.
Yeah. Any luck? Like anything about that process that's you're like struggling with or liking, or
Yeah, actually, and I have a video about this on my channel. I kind of didn't mean to start. I just had a connection with an agent who was willing to kind of review the letter, and then she asked to see some pages, and so I sent it to 10 others, and I ended up getting 4 requests, but 3 have come back as rejections so far. So I haven't queried anybody else yet. I think I'm thinking another round of editing, just kind of based on that. But it's been a really positive experience so far. I think I've been lucky. It hasn't been very frustrating or anything yet.
Yeah, that's fun. I think it always seems like you definitely rack up the rejections more than obviously the exceptions. So I'll be interested to,
of course, yeah.
like I think what it was about J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. She shopped it to 29 different publishers or something, and they were all just like, no.
Yeah. No.
So
not for us. This doesn't fit the current market.
Yeah, which is crazy now because I mean, the amount of money that whole franchise has made is insane. But
insane.
Yeah. So what are you currently working on? What's the news story?
The news story was meant to be something that I would write in December as a very simple YA Christmas romance. It was going to be reworking a project that I'd worked on 2 years ago that I called Project Musical. And then I started outlining the idea, and I ended up instead I'm writing a 6 POV. It still is Christmas love stories, but they're all kind of intertwined, and it's based around the production of the Nutcracker. And so it's very fun. It's like a Christmassy YA rom-com. It's super fun. It's a lot of POVs, which I try and do a POV for something actually. I've never really done before in a cohesive, arch plot story. But it's super fun to do. So
that's a lot of POVs. So the story I'm writing is kind of, I originally had a lot of POVs, and then I was like, because it's with the fantasy stuff, it's it's kind of hard not to have a bunch. And then I thought it was getting kind of crazy, so I tried to kind of rewrite things from a single, and it just wasn't quite working that way either. So I've kind of ended on a 2 or 3, but juggling 6 is quite a lot.
Yeah. The thing is, they feel contained because it's 6 POVs and 5 love stories. The pitch of it is basically Love Actually meets Kate in Waiting, which is a Becky Albertelli book. The author of Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, which became the movie Love, Simon. She also wrote Kate in Waiting, which is really great. YA book. And it feels very contained because it's everyone they're connected, but there's each of these stories here, and it's fun how they go together. And I set it over, I think it's 5 days, so it's only over 5 or 6 days, so it's not too crazy. I think I've put enough constraints on it. So far it's just been fun to play around with the characters. But I think what I'm having trouble with so far is just making sure there's actual plot, external plot, and sort of each individual has their own journey, but then that overarching plot structure of the book, where's the global all lost moment, as well as each character's, kind of figuring that minutia out has been the tricky part.
Yeah, and balancing it across your characters too, so that it feels like everyone kind of gets
Mhm.
their moment in that, can be tricky.
Yeah.
So do you feel
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
with the so you said you kind of constrained it down to like 5 days and stuff. Do you like having those kinds of constraints to like does you think it helps with your creativity or like how do you go about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I always say that, or I guess I don't say it. It's something that the director of my master's program used to say, which was creativity loves constraints. And I think it's really true. So I guess for the first book, it's like in the constraints of the heist genre, which is actually quite a specific um, genre that you have to do. And this one, it really started to click when I did decide on that structure. Maybe it's the product manager and be of like, we need a scope. And this is the scope that we're working in. But yeah, I find it very helpful. And then it's easy to get creative, I think, within those constraints. Um, because you can, I don't know, it challenges you to think when when you don't have the whole world available. It actually challenges you to think of things that are more interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of like how like discipline can give you freedom. Like if you have a budget, it can help you be
Yeah,
free with your finances or like those kinds of things. Or if you are disciplined about going to the
totally.
gym, then you'll be healthier and have, more
Yeah,
freedom of health or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that's really cool. I
I like that parallel.
I have a couple of questions and I want to ask you
Well,
about well, first off, before we get to that, how has your process
Reviews.
changed from the last one you're doing to now? Has it changed at all? Are you pretty much doing the same type of thing? Like how's it evolved?
It's yes and no. So unfortunately, what I really have proved to myself is that my process is I start writing, and then around like the 10 to 20K mark, I get stuck. And then I sit there and I don't write anything for like 2 months. And I get very frustrated about it. And then eventually I say, okay, figure this out. And I sit down and I like replot the whole thing,
Hmm.
going from the beginning, do some editing, and then like start from there and actually write. So I'm now on the actually writing part. And it sounds like a very unique process, but I've done it this is the fourth book I've done it for now. So I guess it's just what has to happen. Um, but what is different is I think what I've learned is that I have to write a scene twice for it to be any sort of scene. So I've been letting a small amount of editing happen, whereas I used to not really do that.
Hmm.
But I've been kind of writing chunks of like chapters and then going back and rewriting each scene, just to clean up the structure and stuff, and then going forward. So not every single 1,000 words I'm editing, but in a few chunks of like 10K or so. I've been letting myself go back, and that's been really nice.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and will hopefully save a bit of the stress of editing at the
yeah.
end.
I've had some I feel like that's actually fairly normal to like, especially when you first start something, you get really excited about it, and so you just all of a sudden you have all these ideas, and so you just start writing, and you get like 10,000 words, 15,000 words, and then all of a sudden it just grinds to a halt, and you're like, "Uh-oh, I have no idea what to do with this, and maybe this was a terrible idea," you know?
Yeah, that's 100% what it is, because I get really impatient and I'm like, I just want to write it. And then I do. And then you write the beginning, which is always the easy part where you're setting things up and it's beautiful and you're putting all
Hmm.
these breadcrumbs in, and then you get to the middle and you're like, oh,
Yeah, the dreaded
what did I
middle.
do? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. Do you so with the POVs, so I've heard a couple of people do that differently. So like Brenden Sanderson, for instance, I
Yeah.
believe I've heard him say that he writes like a single point of view through the whole story. Like he'll write that whole character's journey and then he'll go back and write another character. So like and then he kind of mushes it all together after he's written each character's story. Are you doing something like that? Are you kind of writing it intermixed as you go?
I'm 100% writing it intermixed as I go. I've thought about trying to do just one, but because I don't know how he does that, or because like the characters know each other, I'm advancing other characters' stories a little bit, anyways, in others' POVs. So they're not the POV character, but the story is still, there's a few hundred words that's dedicated to advancing their plot line. So I can't do it. But my plan is in editing to edit each POV separately at some point for voice and stuff.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing.
Let's make sure it's squeezed.
I'm kind of like, I don't know how he does, because I'll write maybe a section, like maybe I'll skip over a part a little bit and go to the next part of that POV's point of view. But then I can't do that very long before I'm like, okay, now I've lost track of where everyone else is supposed to be. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to do it. But
for sure. Yeah. I understand why, because I think switching between them when you have somebody to is every time you go to write the next scene and a different person, I have to go back, read a little bit, reread a bit about the character, kind of like reorient myself to what's happening. So yeah, I guess it is something of a trade-off, but the chronology of it, I think, would be too difficult for me.
Yeah, and I find that when you switch POVs, it's kind of like a new beginning. Like it gives you a little fresh burst of, hey, I finished slogging through this character, but I get a fresh start with this one. Yes. So you kind of, it gives a little bit of a break, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this one, yes.
Right. So that transitions well into my questions about AI. And there's a lot of people who are like, how does this fit in? Obviously, AI is not going away at all. It's here to stay. I think there's obviously been a huge uptick in people just straight up writing a book on ChatGPT or whatever. So before I tell you my thoughts and maybe solely what you think, what do you think about it?
Yeah. Okay. I have some thoughts on it. So in terms of, I still don't think that it's very good in terms of writing stuff from scratch or even editing. I've experimented with it where I've given the writing to not even just ChatGPT, but there are writing specific tools like Pseudo-Write. I've played around a little bit. And you have it, edit this for you. And then it comes back and you're like, you've just taken all the voice and all the interesting stuff out of my writing. So no, thank you. That's not helpful. But what I have found it for is if you use it as like a very specific, almost like thesaurus or encyclopedia kind of. So I'll do things like for the Heights, I would say, what are 15 reasons people would need to evacuate a building? What are 10 different security systems that could be on a museum? And like just to help brainstorm with some of those mechanical things, I found it useful. And then sometimes for looking for like better verbs and that kind of thing, going in and just asking it for those, it can sometimes, if I use it in a sentence, it can sometimes give me the verbs a bit better than a thesaurus can. It's just more tailored to the meaning of the sentence. So I found it helpful for that. If you kind of think of it as just like a very specific, almost search engine, kind of.
It's kind of like an advanced search, Google
like,
or something.
Things on there will give you the wrong answers, but yeah, exactly. Just tailored more to what you want, and I found that really helpful. But yeah, I think I don't know where it will go. And I also I used it a little bit more heavily at some point, like when it first came out, trying to do things, and it just kind of took the fun out of it. I was like, first of all, I was like, gosh, I'm gonna have to edit this because it's bad. And it doesn't sound like me. And second of all, I'm like, but this is my story. So.
Yeah, I think, and so ChatGPT especially has a very kind of specific way that it writes things that I found where, so like my wife has a dance studio. And so I've used it for things like just little sections of text on her website or something, where we just had some information. It was like, I just need a paragraph, And it has a very specific way, whether it's something like that or whether you use it for any other kind of writing, where it adds like overly flowery words and it's like very intense with what it writes. And so I've been doing a lot of research into how do you really engineer the prompt correctly to like give you better results. So
Mm-hmm.
my whole thought on it right now is
Yeah.
I think if you can figure out a way to use it as a tool and not to actually
Yeah.
write, I think that that's what it will be great
Yes.
for. So like I don't believe there's ever going to be
Absolutely.
like the next Lord of the Rings is not going to be written by AI. At least not in the short term
Mm-mm.
right now. Um
Yeah.
and so the question becomes how can you use it? And so I've thought of two use cases right now. One of them I think is really interesting. I just made a video about it. Um, so the first one I think is for like learning. So similar to what you were saying about
Mm-hmm.
researching and stuff, I think another great use case is like, say you're struggling with, you're always writing in passive voice or something, giving it
Yeah.
that and having it help you find the flaws. Like, okay, how would I change this to active voice? And just using it as like, not to write it for you, but to
Yeah.
help you see the flaws, to learn it so that you can eventually do it better on your own.
Yeah.
And even grammar, and
Yeah.
there's things like Grammarly; those have been around forever, and so I think some of that's
Yeah.
fine. But actually using it as like a learning research tool, I think is a great use case.
I really like that. Yeah.
And then the other one, so I recently they just for ChatGPT specifically, you can do a custom GPT. So
Yeah.
basically, like a specific use case about for this GPT. So what I've been
Mm.
experimenting with is I basically compiled all of my notes and outlines and everything into a couple of documents, and then I uploaded those to a custom chat GPT, and I gave it very specific
And that,
rules. So I was like, you are not allowed to create anything. You can't give me any prose. You can't like, no suggestions, nothing. So what it becomes now is it's just like a searchable database for your story.
yeah,
So like for me, like I've got a
that's
lot
really,
of projects and it's a very long thing that I'm working through. So like there's so many details where I'm like, okay, so now I can say, give me the details of this character in this chapter. And it won't create anything. It just gives me the relevant information. So
yeah,
that's kind of how I'm experimenting with it.
that's helpful. I wonder if it could do the holy grail of things that I really want sound writing software to do, which is I want to be able to say like this character's name and have it give me all of the dialogue that the character says in a certain chunk or in a whole book or whatever. Because I want to be able to go through it for consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I know that would work.
Yeah, so it definitely can. And it's been really interesting to test. So like I'll
Yeah.
bring up a character and be like, give me the general overview of this character over these three outlines, and it'll kind of give you
Mhm.
or that like give me the dialogue for this character in chapter 1, and it can give you all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like building your own personal research assistant. So like instead of
Yeah.
every time going to your notes and having to reread it all and find the different things you're trying to look for, it can just pull that information for you. So
That's a great use case. I might very well use that or try that out, especially for editing a manuscript.
mhm.
If it's beyond Control F, it can be hard to find certain things or look for certain consistencies.
Mhm.
Um, and then the documents, I never remember what anybody's wearing or what anybody
Right.
like. So something like that could be very helpful.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
one
I
of
really
the
like that use case.
rules I put in there too was like, if I ask about a story point, give me like if
Mhm.
there's any discrepancies anywhere. So like if later in the book
Mhm.
I go against what this is earlier, make sure to note that so I can see it. So
Oh yeah, I really and like
it's been helpful so far. But again, it's like it's got very strict rules of like I do not want it suggesting, or
yeah.
I want all of the creation to come from me. So it's just
Mhm.
regurgitating the things I've already created.
What you friend.
Yeah.
That's a really good point too, because as I've been doing my research on agents and stuff, I've seen at least one who says, or all of them now are basically asking you to disclose any use of AI that you use in your writing, and it does get murky if you're using something like Grammarly, which will now like rewrite sentences for you using AI. And so I think you have to be kind of careful, and even like tracking, if you want to get traditionally published, at least like tracking your AI use.
Yeah.
What tools you're using for what, because you do have to then tell people what you did, because of course they don't want to publish something written by AI. They want to publish something written by an author. So yeah, the whole, you can't generate anything. I think that would be a good way to use it, but I think you do have to be careful that like nothing gets into your book that's generated by AI.
Yeah, and definitely not like even if it were to give me that prose, doesn't mean I have to write it into the book,
Yeah.
But so far,
absolutely.
it's definitely very like I put some rules in that kind of overlap. So it's like you're not allowed to create anything is the general rule. But then it's like you're not allowed to suggest anything about the plot. You're not allowed to. So there's kind of like this section of overlapping rules. So it really catches itself.
Yeah.
And I've tested it where I'm like, okay, write me paragraph 1 of chapter 1. And it's like, I am here to be a reference and I cannot create any sort. So it works pretty well. But I made a video about it, so you should check it out and see if it works for you.
Yeah, I will. I will 100% will. That's a really cool use case. I like that.
I also agree with you too about, I think it takes the fun out of it. Like the fun is, it's kind of like the journey versus the destination. It's like, obviously we want to get to the destination, but part of it is the journey and the fun of creating it. And,
Of course. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speak ill of anybody who's using AI to write their book, but I kind of wonder if you like it. Like if you like writing, why you would want something else to write it for you, And I think using it as a tool, 100%, helping with editing, helping you learn to structure sentences better. Even there's some tools that will like give you feedback. It's maybe not the best feedback you'll ever get because it doesn't really lean into emotions or feelings or anything like that. It can't be a reader. It can only kind of give you what it sees. So there's great uses for it, I think, as a tool. But yeah, it's the fun, the purpose of creating is the whole reason.
Right.
To write something, for me anyway. So, to just get a product at the end doesn't even really matter.
Well, and if you give it to, any other kind of artistic pursuit, like, you can use it for art, but part of the fun of art is actually painting and drawing. Or like if you're a musician, like I'm a musician.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I like to play the guitar. Like I don't want to just tell the AI to create a guitar piece. I actually want to play it. So,
No. Yeah, 100%. It's like listening to music versus playing music for yourself, kind of. Like they're very different thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think the other thing is, and I think people want to still connect with the creator. So like part of the reason I like Lord of the Rings is I like the story, but I also like listening about and reading about J.R. Tolkien. Like who was he and what was his life? Same with Brenden Sanderson. Like I like his books, but also I find the person very fascinating, So it's connecting with the artist, and you watch a movie and so like Friends is a great example, or like a sitcom. You watch it for 10 years and you feel like they're your personal best friends. Like them because you've watched that show for so long. Like people want to still connect with the person behind the art.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I think if you read a really good book that really moves you, you're immediately searching the author's name and trying to see like what they've written about it and how they came up with their ideas. Where did it come from? How did they make their decisions? Like what are the, you want to learn more about their life just to you really appreciate what they created. And that connection is so cool and so important, and huge part of reading, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. What do you, so just kind of a little segue into I've been reading a book it's a new book from, I don't know if you know who Cal Newport is. He wrote the book Deep Work.
I love Cal
Oh my
Newport.
gosh, I
Yes.
love. So he put out
Yeah.
his new book, Slow Productivity. I think it just came
Okay.
out like maybe 3 weeks ago. Like I kind of missed it, and then I just picked it up.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the things he talks about in there, and again, this kind of ties to the AI thing, is do you, how do I say it? So like AI is going to allow people or anyone to just create a ton of books or a ton of art. Like we can just now,
Yeah.
I can write 5,000 books in my lifetime now. Is that the goal though?
Yeah.
Or is the goal to
Yeah.
produce 3 books that are, or one piece of work that is really meaningful and impactful? So
Yeah.
it's just an interesting question. I mean, again, but if you look at Brenden Sanderson, I mean, he's cranking out books like a crazy person.
Insane.
Like, I don't even know
how much he can write.
It's nuts. And then he just put out another secret project, and I'm like, when? How? Like
another one?
He's like, yeah, he's got a 5th one. So it's like, are you in like a time warp? Like, what is happening? But
no.
Anyways, yeah. So
maybe he is a time traveler.
Maybe he is.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that whole idea?
I mean, yeah. First of all, Cal Newport, I absolutely loved. I started reading his books right before I went to university.
Mm-hmm.
He has one called, one of his really, like his second or third, I think, called How to Be a Straight A Student University. So I read that. And then I read Digital Minimalism, was by him. I haven't read Deep Work yet, but I love digital minimalism so much.
Yeah.
And I don't read a lot of self-help books. I find them overwhelming. They're usually really repetitive. But he really goes for like the scientific key. It's evident, empirical. It's always really practical. It's very well done.
Yeah.
So I think I 100% agree with that. I think, it's kind of quantity versus quality. It sounds like probably getting a little bit deeper than that. But it just made me think of, I remember the last time we talked, you were saying, is it 10 books or a 12 book series you're working on? I remember you saying
13.
something effective. I don't care if this takes me 13.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't care if it takes me like however many years, decades to write this. I'm going to write it well. And I really want to write this story. And I think, I think that's the right attitude or not the right, but I think that's a really good attitude to have about it. I don't know. I guess there's something to be said for just like performative productivity or like meaningless productivity. Like, again, I think of Cal Newport because I think of university a lot. But one of the points he had in the book and that I saw myself was people would go to the library for like 10 hours and be like, I just studied for 10 hours. I was in the library. I've been like, look at me. I'm so productive. Like this crazy studious student. It's like, actually what you were doing is you were like on your phone for 7.5 hours. And the rest of the time you're highlighting a textbook.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you actually didn't get anything done.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of that same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been, not to go on a huge tangent about Cal Newport, but I've been obsessed with his books forever. The first one I did read was Deep Work.
Yeah.
And then I went back and read the one right before that, I think is So Good They Can't Ignore You, which that one's a really good one.
Okay.
But then I've got all of them since then. So Digital Minimalism. And then he did one called A World Without Email, which is really great.
Yeah.
And then this new one's pretty good so far. I didn't read the college ones because one was well out of college by then, and I dropped out of college, so it became not as relevant to me. But
fair enough.
I think, a quick side about the self-help books. I definitely agree with you that there's a lot out there, and it can get really overwhelming really fast. And so, I've focused on a few authors where I really like their ideas. Like Cal Newport's one of them, where it's like I read all of his books because I just. It makes sense to me, but it's also not overwhelming in the same, but
totally.
I think,
I always say there's,
go ahead.
Sorry. I always say there's nothing scarier or more intimidating than walking through the self-help aisle of a bookstore because you just have all of these things about like how to be the best you coming at you from every direction, and you're like, ah. And then you just run back to fiction.
Well, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't want to be the best me right now. I'd like to just be the crappy version.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
back to the quantity versus quality too. One of the things for me is, and I've seen this a lot with some of Cal Newport stuff, but kind of recognizing the season of life you're in too. So like we're at a season right now where, we're in our mid 30s. We have a 9-year-old daughter who's going to be 10 soon, and we're just busy being parents and trying to work and do life. And so it's like, if I don't get to seriously write or publish a book until I'm in my 40s, like that's just the season we're in, and it's being able to accept that stuff.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
One of I struggle with YouTube's been interesting for me, and we'll probably still talk about YouTube. When I started the YouTube game, it started to kind of change my perspective of like, I didn't realize it at first, but I was like, all of a sudden I was feeling like I had to get it done faster and write faster and get it all out there. And I've had to kind of recalibrate that of like, it's okay. Like, just because we jumped into the social media game doesn't mean it's gotta all of a sudden change everything else.
Yeah. I think social media is particularly bad for it because the algorithms really rely on you producing stuff. I've really noticed that with my channel, for example, when I post regularly, I get so much more like growth and stuff. Views, new subscribers, whatever. Even if the videos themselves, like the individual ones, aren't doing that great, it somehow overall does better. Whereas it'll like grind to a stop if it's not regular. So I'm making an effort at the moment to be a little bit trying to do 2 a week on Tuesdays and Fridays for a while. We'll see how that goes. I've generally been particularly good at being consistent. But yeah, it does create that, well, you have to have more. You have to have more feeling. So yeah, well, I know where that comes from.
And it'll reward you for like, so I've experimented with a lot of things. I've done where I've gone on a stretch of like, I'm putting out something every day. I've done one where I'm doing everything once a week, once a month. And the more YouTube is definitely a quantity over quality game. So it's like, the more stuff you put out, the more that the algorithm spins up. But that's ultimately not really healthy or sustainable or, anything like that.
Yeah. I think in the long term, too, that sort of quantity over quality, even if you are putting out a lot, I think if they're not good videos, that people are getting something from, then I think you aren't going to get the long-term like staying power, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you can't keep churning out forever.
Well, that I run out of ideas. So like I just have no idea what to make, or all my ideas are like a regurgitation of something I've done before. Which is fine to do occasionally if you have a new idea about it or whatever. But yeah, so I've got like, I don't know. I think I'm past 300, almost 350 videos, I think, on my channel. And that's over the course of 3 years or something. And only a few of those have like regularly get views. So like I will publicly thank you, by the way. I told you this over email, but that video that you were persistent about me getting done, which I'm grateful that you did, because I get like almost 100 views a day on that video since I put it out.
That's amazing.
It just like hasn't stopped.
I mean, it was a great video. And I really I think especially how you did that introduction of like, you showed clips from different fantasy stories or something like that. It was so well done and it's so gripping. So I think you really get people like staying for, if YouTube looks at that, obviously we know for like how many people are there at 30 seconds. I think you did a really good job of gripping people. And then obviously the information in it is great too. So
well, thank you.
Very happy to have been an influence in getting that video out there.
Well, and you had messaged about it and we talked about it. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I it's like I work for a church, so Christmas time gets really busy. And so I was just like,
Right, yeah.
I totally forgot about it. And then you'd messaged again, and I was like, yes, I'm going to get this done. It's going to be fun. And so I'm glad I did. So that it's past like
Oh,
over 7,000 views now.
amazing.
So
Yeah, that's the short amount of time too.
yeah.
Relatively short.
The only other videos
Nice.
I have that have a lot of views, I have one that's got like 14,000 over the last 2.5 years. It's like a video I did on Notion.
Yeah.
That one just keeps chugging along. Like, I don't. So my point being, for all the videos I've made, there's maybe only like 6 that are constantly like people keep watching. So then I'm like,
Yeah.
those are the only 6 that have really mattered, of the whole thing.
Yeah. 100%. I have the exact same thing. I think I have 2 that are at 10K, a couple around like the 7, 8, 6 range. And those ones continually get views. And I keep, you look at your subscriber thing, where they're coming from. You're like, it's all that one damn video from 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I make videos. I like using Notion. And I think we've talked about that before. And I make quite a few videos about Notion. But then like the whole channel started, like all of my subscribers are coming from that. And then part of me is like, I don't really want to just make videos about Notion. Like, I like it and I want to talk about it. But so it's that game of like, do you try to go against it? Do you lean into it? That whole thing. But obviously 100%. I think anything, as long as it's related to writing and helping people write and all that, ultimately it's fine. But I have other things I want to talk about.
Definitely. Yeah. For me, it's this. What is it? It's is it the Anatomy Story? I don't know. Oh, it's Brenden Sanderson, and it's Story Grid are my 2 biggest ones.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't talk about Story Grid forever. I have like a couple of videos, a full 5 video like little mini series. I'm like, well, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep mining this thing.
Yeah, the Story Grid's not changing. Like, it's not like becoming something different every time. So yeah, I did a series on like each part of the 3-act story structure, and so it was like 16 videos, after you break it all up or whatever. And then after that, like, I'm like, well, there's nothing else to talk about that. Like, it pretty much is what it is,
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
Fun. I think I don't have many more questions. Is there? I was going to ask you about. I think we talked about this last time. Are you working on any other projects in other mediums, like using? I don't know. I think we talked about maybe a script for something before.
Yeah, I was doing this online workshop with the Nightwood Theater, which is in Canada. And basically it was just, they got a bunch of people who were writers to, give feedback on plays, and people would read them out loud. That ended in the fall, so I haven't done too much on that since. I just got into the novels, but it's always on the back burner of like, oh, I should really go back and finish that or clean that up or try to do something with it. But I honestly have no idea what you do with play, because it feels like, I mean, it's really hard to get a book published, but with a play, I'm like, what if I find an actor? Like, give it to a theater. I don't really know what to do. I have to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, I just feel like, because I've done, I make videos and stuff for my job as well, but I've also done me and my brother made a small documentary about something local in our hometown, and it was like 35 minutes, and we have our local theater that we ended up playing it at, but it's like, if you do anything like that, where it's like a play or a movie, or like, now all of a sudden there's so many more people that have to get involved to actually get it out there. And so it's definitely, I think that's part of why I ended up liking writing so much, is that I can just do it at home, like anytime, but then there's, I think, drawbacks to that too, where it's very solitary and very, alone.
Yeah. I think there's pros and cons to both for sure, but it is nice with novels. Just to sometimes you're just kind of in your little zone and you get to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a new critique partner of mine, and she said something about like she'd been getting feedback as she was writing for a while, but then she found it really empowering to be like, you know what? No, I'm gonna write the draft with like no outside input at all, and just like get the story down.
Mm-hmm.
Do a round or two of editing myself before I show it to anybody. I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. To say like, oh, it's empowering to just say this is my story. I'm gonna write it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things I'm kind of exploring. I haven't really said anything about this, but I'm working with a friend of mine to work on a graphic novel that's kind of set in my world.
How cool!
Which I love comic books. I've always loved. Obviously, you can tell from like the posters behind me, but I love comic books and always have. And so we're just kind of like this one particular character. I was like, man, this would be a really cool little side story. But then it's like, I don't draw, and I never have. And for me to learn that would take forever. So it's like now I have to find someone to work with on that. And then now I have to start getting them up to speed on the story and how, like, so it's a totally different experience, but I'm still just doing the writing part of it. And
that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
I'm kind of excited about it. I think so part of it was I was thinking through like I'm probably not going to publish a book for a while. Like I'm just cranking through those. They're just going to take me a long time. But I was like, a graphic novel, that's something that I could kind of write a script for. It's like 90 pages of script, not actual prose. And then work with an artist. And so it kind of takes the pressure off of it all just being on me to accomplish. And so I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll get a graphic novel out before we get a novel out.
That would be super cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for chatting with me. And this has been fun. We need to do it again for sure.
Absolutely.
Where can we find you? Where all those things, social media things, and
of course, yes. So it's Nicole Wilbur on YouTube, and then I have a Substack as well, which is Nicole Wilbur Chasing Chapters, which you can check out, and it's basically my newsletter, or it is my newsletter. With some other little tidbits and things I'm playing around with on there. It's really fun. I'm really getting into Substack. So, it's right here by me.
Awesome. Well, that's been for this episode of Writing Quest. So thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.